Good morning, everyone. This is Hometown Heroes podcast. And I know you're noticing that there's somebody missing this morning. So, Rick is not going to be with us today. He has got his son Tyler stepped in to help out, and we'll bring up pictures and do all that stuff. But that Rick is just not able to be here. He'll let you know what's going on and how he's doing. He's doing great, but he just couldn't be on the show this morning. So this morning, our guest is Jim Hodgson, and some of you guys might know Jim. If you go out to the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, you'll see him there. Like, I think you probably kind of live there, Jim. It seems like you're always there.
It's
Opposite
like,
props, yeah, the Vietnam Veteran Memorial for Tarrant County, you name it. Jim has probably been around and been involved in lots and lots of stuff. So we are going to welcome Jim in, and he's going to tell us a little about himself and what drove him to join the military, then get involved in the Aviation Museum, and of course the Tarrant County Vietnam Veteran Memorial. So Jim, take it away.
well, thank you, Mary. It's good to see you this morning. And I am Jim Hodgson. I'm here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum today. I'm the executive director here and the chairman of the OV-10 Bronco Association. But many years ago, I grew up in the Chicago area in O'Hare Airport. And so as a young boy, I was seeing airplanes all the time, military, F-86s and things like that, as well as the airliners. And most pilots can tell you the exact moment in time when they decided that flying is what they wanted to do. And for me, it was a night I was about 8 years old or so, and driving home from the family past O'Hare Field, and it was dark in an old DC-7 or DC-6 with landing lights on and sparks and fire coming out of the engines, came roaring over the top of the car, and I just announced to the family, well, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And without turning around, my mother said, "That's nice, Jimmy." But that kind of started the pursuit at that point. As I got a little bit older and started to see what it was going to take to fly, the only real option for me was military flying. At that point in time, certainly couldn't afford the cost of private lessons and the rest of it. But I'd also grown up as a Boy Scout and a Sea Scout. And so the whole regimentation and uniforms and that kind of stuff really kind of led me towards the military. It was while I was in college that I learned from an Marine Corps officer selection officer about a program called the Platoon Leaders Class program. But I think I need to step back before that. I looked at different ways that I could do it. And one of the ways I thought that I could fly in the military was to go to one of the academies. And so I had applied to all the service academies, and I ended up going to the Coast Guard Academy. Entered there, and that's where I think Tyler's got a picture of the first airplane I was on, which was the Coast Guard Academy Bark Eagle. We spent time on that, learning how to operate a four-masted sailing ship and those kinds of things. But it was looking at the aviation program within the Coast Guard, and I determined that was going to take a long time. There's a commitment. This is a T2 Buckeye. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's a commitment in all the military academies through how long you have to pay back after you finish college, and then if you go to flight school and all these other things that get added on. And at the time with the Coast Guard, it looked like I was going to have to serve about 10 years after I was out of the Coast Guard Academy to fulfill my commitment. That seemed an awful long time for somebody who was 18 years old. And while I was at the academy, one of my classmates who had been an enlisted Marine told me about a program called the Platoon Leaders Class. And so it was something that you did during the summers while you were in college, and it could lead you to a commissioning and direct entry into flight school. So when I left the Coast Guard Academy, I went to the University of Illinois, where I studied industrial engineering. And that's where I learned about and joined the Marine Corps platoon leader class. So I spent 2 6-week summers at Quantico, Virginia, learning the the basics of being a Marine and a Marine Corps officer. And I went under what was referred to at the time an aviation guarantee. So I knew that I was going to go to flight school. And so upon graduation, I made my way down to Pensacola, and that's where it all really began, was down there. That was the first time I'd ever actually flown an airplane, and started out with the T-34, which is a single engine trainer that was actually used up until just recently. It's been replaced now, but there it is. That's the T-34 Mentor. First airplane I ever soloed, first airplane I flew in the military, and flew those out of Pensacola. And after, I don't remember how many hours it was, 30, 40 hours, something like that, we graduated. And in my particular case, I stayed in Pensacola because I entered a program at the University of West Florida, which was an master's in aeronautical engineering program that was set up just for the naval aviators. So I did my basic jet training, or primary jet training, in Pensacola in the T2 Buckeye. And that was the airplane I went to the boat in the first time. Kind of a funny story about that. And there it is, T2 Buckeye. We used the Lexington for training at that point in time, same ship that now is down in Corpus Christi. But time and time again, you go out and you practice, and you learn how to use the meatball, which was the light guidance system on the carriers that's still used today. And you're listening to the LSO, the landing signal officer, and you're taking his direction, and you're paying very high attention to what the meatball is doing, and whether it'll tell you whether you're too fast, too slow, too high, left or right. And when it came time for my group to go out to the Lexington, there was a storm in the Gulf, and we were put off, I think it was 2 or 3 days before we could go out to the carrier, just because of the storm. So training was backing up, and then they sent us out the first day, and the boat was moving so much, they didn't even have us come down and even attempt to land. But the final day that we went out there, we went out to the boat, and the first thing the LSO did after all this training of paying specific attention to the meatball was, the first thing they said was, "You're looking good, disregard the ball." The boat was still moving around so much so that you were almost like being blind and kind of feeling your way down to the aircraft carrier. But made my landings and finished up that portion of the training. Went on to formation training in that airplane, and then aerial gunnery. And then from there, I went to Kingsville, transferred down to Kingsville to VT-22, where we started to fly advanced jets in the TA-4 Skyhawk. And I think Tyler's got a picture of that one too. It's the white and yellow airplanes. So I went through VT.
Jim,
yes.
Let me ask you a question as I'm looking at this picture. So
there we go.
As you're landing on an aircraft carrier, how scary is that? Because you hear the stories of the planes that don't quite stop and then they end up going off the end. But
they do something to you in training. First of all, you do so much of it that it becomes pretty routine in terms of the pattern work that you're doing. So it's the contingencies and the other things that happen. So, and then 2 or 3 days before you go out to the boat, you watch films that are referred to as carrier mishaps. And so for a couple of days before you go to the boat, you get a healthy respect for all of the bad things that can happen out there. And so, it's one of those feelings.
You probably don't want to make one of those films, right?
You don't want to do any of those things. But, so when you finally get out to the boat, I can remember going out to the boat the first time, and you're taking little peeks. You're in formation, but you're taking little peeks. And I remember coming over the top of the Lexington, and it was the feeling of excitement and being a little bit afraid and everything else all mixed up into one. But as soon as you get into the pattern, it's something you're used to, and you do the pattern work, but it's always, there's always that little iffiness about when you get in close, whether you're going to actually catch the wire or not. And then the reassurance of being almost thrown into the dashboard when the hook catches. But there were all kinds of questions. People would talk about a thing called a cold cat, which means there wasn't enough pressure on the catapult to put the airplane off. And the instructors would just say, well, if you think you've got a cold cat, just press on the brakes and stop. If it's not a cold cat, you're going to go fly anyway. So there's just all kinds of a myriad of things that can happen at the boat. And so you are so busy once you get into the flow that you almost don't have time to think about your feelings about it. You're just doing your job.
That's probably smart. That muscle memory kicks in. That you've practiced and practiced and practiced, which is why you do it, right? So
Right.
I just can't imagine.
There weren't a lot of surprises. I mean, you learned about what the handlers were going to do and how that was going to work and the things that were going to be said. And so that kind of stuff, even though it's brand new, it's kind of like now you're doing it for real. And you've already have some expectation of that happening. So the bigger thing is, what are you going to do if you get outside of that comfort zone? So luckily I was never there. As an instructor, that was a different thing. But as a student, it all went pretty well.
Oh, that's great.
So then I went to advanced jets and flew the TA-4 Skyhawk and went through that program. Again, we went back out to the boat in the scooter, but then we did air-to-air gunnery. We did ACM, air combat maneuvering, where you're fighting other airplanes, and then ground attack and low-level flying, everything up to getting you ready to be what they consider a fleet pilot. And then when you get your wings, just prior to getting your wings, you get verbal orders to where you're going to go. And the TA-4 is where you really start to feel like you're a military pilot. You wear the TA-4. It's a very small cockpit, and you just kind of really get in and fit yourself in, and you become part of the machine. And that's where that transition takes place in advanced jet training, where you don't think anymore about the basics of moving the airplane. You just think about what you need to do, and you do it. But coming out of flight school, I originally was given orders to F4s at El Toro in California, which was every young boy's dream, was to be a fighter pilot on the West Coast. Only to be given verbal or written orders a couple of weeks later after I got my wings to VMO2 at Camp Pendleton to fly OV-10s. And I didn't know what any of those words meant. I didn't know what Camp Pendleton was. I didn't know that VMO2 was Marine Observations 2, and I virtually did not know what an OV-10 was. So I went from being on the top of the mountain to being down in the valley. And there's the OV-10, which became near and dear to my heart, and now is the airplane, and because of this airplane that this museum was started here. The particular markings, there I am as a first lieutenant, my hero picture in the OV-10 at Camp Pendleton. Airplane was versatile. We could go out every day for a month and fly different missions in the type of things that we did. We would go out and do reconnaissance. We'd do mapping and observation. We would do logistics works. We would do ground attack. We would control naval gunfire. We would control artillery and mortars. We would insert recon teams. It was just a vast array of the things that we did, with our primary job being tactical air controllers airborne, which meant that we were certified, authorized, however you might want to refer to it, to go into an area and control all of the activity in the area. It wasn't a matter of only controlling airplanes on a single target, but you were really sort of a battlefield commander in the air. You were controlling helicopters coming and going, and as well as maybe transports, and then other fighters and the ground attack airplanes. So it became very, very busy in that cockpit. So the OV-10 was not a difficult airplane to fly, but that's good because the missions oftentimes required an awful lot of attention outside. We normally flew with an artillery officer in the back seat. And so when we were out doing the missions, the artillery officer would talk to the ground, and the pilot would talk to the air, talk to the other airplanes and that kind of thing. And I just have to mention that the paint scheme on this airplane was one that I designed. The CO at the time, we were getting ready to do the centennial paint jobs on airplanes. And he asked me to come up with some different ideas. And so this was it. And one of the big deals was changing the codex or the modex on the tail of the airplane. It wasn't often done. uniform was not our code, but I had to go to the Marine Corps headquarters and convince them to change it to uniform for morale boost, because we were the Broncos, and so we should have 2 horseshoes on our tail. So,
Oh, I was going to ask you what that was all about. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's my claim to fame with the OV-10.
Wow. So we have a lot of similarities, at least in our, so as you talked about going out to O'Hare and all that, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and my dad used to take us in the late 60s. I remember going and sitting down by the end of the runway, which, is probably how I ended up in the Air Force, right? Because I had such a love of the planes and I never had a desire to fly. I did have a desire at one point in time to be a stewardess, because that's what they were back then. But I couldn't meet the height and weight requirements. So that was a dream that was not going to happen back in those days.
Oh, no.
But, yeah, you had to be really thin. And at 5'4", I was not as thin as they needed you to be when I came of age to be able to be a flight attendant. But I had decided by then anyway that the Air Force was the route for me. But I grew up in that same area, watching planes taking off and landing at O'Hare. Man, there's nothing. I mean, back in those days, because you remember how it wasn't so crowded, and you could get near the airport and you could actually sit there and watch without, you weren't. I mean, it's crazy today. You couldn't do that today because there's nowhere to sit. But it was pretty neat where we were able to sit and just sit for a long time and watch. And then I was stationed at Chanute Air Force Base for 5 years, which is right down the road from U of I.
Yeah. I did some of my initial testing down at Chanute for the academies and some of that kind of stuff. But just a little side story here, that growing up around O'Hare, I would do girlfriend selections or date selections by who was willing to go to O'Hare and go to the observation deck at O'Hare and watch airplanes. So,
oh, that's crazy. So you have a comment from one of the folks, Miriam, of course, has commented. I don't know if you can see him, but she said, thank you for your service and all you do. And Paul Freeman said, Jim is awesome. He always lets me set up in the Legends tent at the Fort Worth Alliance show so I could sell my book, collect donations to send to veterans groups. So a few folks out there making some comments, just wanted to share those with you so that you knew there's some folks out there thanking you for what you're doing. So you got through all the way through all of this, and you left the military then in 78.
Well, yeah, but before that, just quickly to go back, I left. My turn was to rotate out of the OV-10s came along, and I was asked what I wanted to do. And I went back to the training command as an advanced jet instructor in the same squadron, and flew TA-4s for about 3 years. And it was just prior, while I was in OV-10s, that I met my wife, Donna, in San Diego. And we were married at Camp Pendleton, and she was a flight attendant for American at the time. And so after that, we just kind of traveled around and followed me and followed her jobs and things like that. And we've been together. We've been together ever since. 50 years this year.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So at any rate, so I was at Kingsville getting ready to, where do I go from there when my next duty station came up? And I was looking at some choices, and I still wanted to fly F4s, but I wanted to do some other things too. And so one of the things I was available, I thought, was to go into the astronaut program, because NASA was looking for more people for the engineering position, or flight engineer position. So I applied to that, and I got a response back that I was turned down. And I asked why, and they said, well, you had to apply through your service. And I said, okay. So I talked to the Marine Corps about that, and they just kind of laughed and said, oh, we picked those guys years ago. So then after that, it was, well, what am I going to do? I'm at a point now where I'm about 30 years old, and you either, at that point in time with the airlines, if you crossed your over 32, you weren't hireable by the airline. So you had to make a decision. So I was looking at whether I stayed in the Marine Corps or not. And if I could go in the astronaut program, I would. And then they said no to that. So I thought, well, I'd like to go to test pilot school. And I was qualified, but I was out of sequence for that. So the next question became, well, do you have any F4 slots? And they said, no, we don't have any F4s. And I said, well, how about our F4s? And my career planner said, do you want to go fly those? And I said, it's an F4, isn't it? And he said, yes. And I said, well, of course I want to go fly it. So I did that for the last 2 years in the Marine Corps. I flew RF4s, which was just such a hoot. I mean, the mission was that we were down low level, going fast, taking pictures of things and getting flight violations because the people on the controllers didn't know what we were required to do and what we'd had permission to do. So that was an amazing airplane and so stable. I wouldn't want to say that's a highlight because my favorite airplane is whatever I'm flying. But it was at this point that after this, I had to make a choice. And so I decided to leave and go to the airlines and was hired by Continental Airlines at the time. So then spent 34 years with Continental Airlines, started out as a flight engineer and then a first officer and then a captain on the 727. Hit almost all of the bases, was based in California and Houston and in El Paso and didn't make Cleveland, but I ended up in Newark before I finished my career. 7-2 in a lot of respects was maybe my favorite. It's a full crew, you had 3 people on it and it was a real cruiser. It was a real airline pilot's airplane. Then from there, when the new 737s came out, I was one of the first of the Continental pilots to fly the 737s. We started out with the 300 model, and I flew the 300s, 500s, 700s, and 800s before I went to the 777. I ended up probably being the high time pilot on the 737, at least for some period of time at Continental, because I was on it for 22 years.
Wow.
And then I knew retirement was coming along, and I wanted to fly the Big Iron at least for a while because my wife had been flying international almost all this entire time that we were married, and she'd talk about her experiences in Japan and in Europe, and I wanted to do some of that. In fact, early on, when I was in the Marine Corps, we made a trip to Hong Kong, and we were getting off of the airplane, and I saw this. I think at the time it was a British Airways or a BOAC captain, 747 captain with his whole crew and 12 or 14 flight attendants with him. And I thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And so I got to the point where I was able to do that with the 777, flying to Europe and Asia, all over the world on that airplane, and then was lucky enough to finish my career on the 787. Along in through there, at about 1998, a group of us got together over a bunch of pictures and a case of beer, talking about the OV-10 and the possibility that an airplane might be available. And we were foolish enough to say, let's start a museum. So that's when that all started.
That beer will get you every time. It'll get you in all kinds of trouble.
I'll tell you what, I've learned a lot of things about starting museums, and sometimes it's over drinks, and sometimes it's somebody's spouse saying, "Get that crap out of the house." So that's a little bit where we started, and it's just been a slow building process. We're in our 25th year here now, and we did a branding change about 10 years ago to emphasize aviation history and achievements here in North Texas. And all of this museum work and the other things that I've done have been, for me, it's been give back. Aviation has been a good career for me. It was very rewarding, and I felt that it was good for me, and I wanted to try to be able to provide some opportunities or some insights or do some inspirational kinds of things to help other people along. And whether it be a veteran meeting his buddies or talking to school kids and lighting them up and getting them interested in aviation careers. So this last 25 years with the museum has really been give back for me. So
Yeah, and it's quite impressive, all of the things that you have in there. I'm going to bring my 8 and 10-year-old grandson when they get out of school. We're going to come
Perfect.
visit the museum. I think they'd enjoy seeing that. And you have it as the most touchable. So
Right.
why is it the most touchable?
Well, it's a couple of reasons. Went to a seminar several years ago, and it was being held in Las Vegas, and the people who were putting it on was a small museum there, and they said, uh, "How do you make yourself known as a 100 watt light bulb in a city of lights like Las Vegas?" And part of it was they said you find that key thing about your business, your museum, that nobody else is doing. And so we came back after that, and I thought, the one thing that we do, because all of our airplanes are outdoors right now, and we have never really restricted people from touching the airplanes, which is something that you can't do at lots of museums, or you can only touch certain ones, and you certainly can't do it at an airport anymore. So we started referring to ourselves as the most touchable warbirds in Texas, uh, because all of our airplanes, you could walk up to them and touch them. And that's the thing with the kids. Our primary customer is 6 to 12 years old. And not only the adults, but the kids are amazed at being able to walk through a helicopter, or touch a wing, or knock on it, or hug a landing gear. I mean, we've seen all of that here, but it's the tactile part about seeing how big they are and touching them and feeling them. And now, over the years, our collection of airplanes is now we're at, I think, 35 today,
Wow.
with some more to come. And so that actually gives us the most airplanes in Texas where you can walk up to them and touch them. There are a couple of others that are bigger than us. Dias is bigger, but all of their airplanes are behind fences and chain links. And there's another, I think it's Mid America over in East Texas, but their airplanes are flyable, so you can't touch those.
Yeah.
So that's the way we become that 100 watt light bulb in a city of lights, is by referring to ourselves as the most touchable warbirds in Texas.
Yeah, and kids are so naturally curious, especially like you said, that age. They want to see it and touch it and experience it, and I think that gives them that exact experience. So, for the folks out there watching, or that will watch this later, if you haven't gone out there, if you haven't taken kids out there, you need to do it, because it really is a neat experience for them to be able to see those the ends. So you could see the outside of a lot of aircraft. You can go out to the Joint Reserve Base today, and you could take pictures in front of and be outside of the aircraft, but you certainly can't get in them and sit in them and look at them and touch it inside. So it's a neat experience. So hopefully folks will get out there and see you guys. And what are the hours y'all are open, Jim?
Right now we're open on Thursdays from 9 until 1, Saturdays from 9 until 4, and Sundays from 11 to 5. Those are our hours. We'll probably do something a little bit different as the summer comes along. But the experiences here, we know that about 90% of the people who come to visit us come to see the airplanes. It's pretty simple. They don't come for the history, although they learn things that they didn't even know. We've got a hallway here in the museum we refer to as the I didn't know that hallway. So many people go through and go, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But for everybody else, it's all about experience here. We've got desktop flight simulators. We've got cockpits kids can get in. We've got arts and crafts and things that the visitors can do. I hate to say just the kids, because some of the parents have just as much fun doing some of this stuff as we do. And virtually all of the tours through the museum can be guided if you want. Our docents are all veterans who have experience in aviation, either working on airplanes or flying them or being crew members. And so they will take you out and walk around and tell you about the airplanes and tell you about their experience with those airplanes during their career in the military. And we find that that's where we get very high grades for that. When people give us reviews, they really enjoy that personal tour of the museum and the airplanes.
Yeah, and it's fabulous, and you can see this picture. And this is, I'm sure we're going to talk about hops and props, but if you look at the picture and you eliminated all the cars and everything, you can see all of the aircraft, and that is a bunch of aircraft. So it's a great
It
thing
is.
to get the kids out there, or if you're just, adults, you want to see some more history. And like Jim said, inside the museum, there's a lot of stuff that you can look at, you can read. It's just really a fabulous place to go. That's really kind of a little hidden secret that not everybody knows about. So we have to get the word out and make sure that folks know it's there. It's easy to get to right off of 820 on the North Loop.
Right.
Super easy to get to. So, get out and enjoy it, especially those days where the weather is just right, like it was yesterday.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah.
If we could have, if the weather can turn for us on Saturday, we're expecting the largest crowd we've ever had for hops and props. Our pre-sales are well above previous years.
That's
And
awesome. So,
part,
Jim, tell the folks listening, what is hops and props and why do you do it?
well, most we looked at this years ago, in that most museums have some kind of an annual gala event as a fundraiser. And we looked into the cost of doing a gala, the big dinner and that kind of thing. And we simply couldn't afford it. So
Yeah,
we looked
they're not cheap.
no, they're not at all. So we looked at what did we have the capability of doing ourselves. And my son and my grandchildren and daughter-in-law live out in Portland, Oregon right now. And we'd been out there and visited them a few times and had an opportunity to go to a couple of beer festivals out there. And they have a beer festival every weekend in Portland, I think. So the idea became that this is something maybe we can do. There's some craft brewers that were starting up, and this is our 9th year. So this was a while back when there wasn't a lot of craft brewing going on here. And we thought maybe this is a way that we've got outdoor space to do an event like this. We can bring some brewers in. We can bring in people who want to sample the beer, but then we can introduce them to the museum and aviation here in North Texas. And then we also, through all of the other things we've done, as you well know, Mary, there are so many veteran support organizations out there.
Right.
And they don't often have opportunities to get in front of the public, to make the public aware of who they are and what they do. And so we thought one of the ways to build an audience and to also support the veterans was to let the veteran support organizations come out and set up for free. And so it was a building process, bringing vendors, having a kids area, making this thing, family friendly the whole time. And I think the first year we had, I don't remember exactly, 9, 10, maybe 12 brewers, and probably didn't have more than just a few hundred people who attended. And over the year, it's built up to where this year we'll have 18 brewers. And I was looking at it this morning, 75 different brews, 2 bands, 10 food trucks, 50 veteran support organizations and vendors. Lockheed Martin is our title sponsor this year, and they're bringing out their F-35 flight simulators. We'll have a reenactors encampment. So it's just going to be a big deal this year. It's gotten bigger and bigger, and people continue to give us great reviews that it's just a very, very fun event to come out to. We are using Northwest Coast rules that I learned when I was in Portland, and that's it. If the weather turns and it rains, well, you're just going to get wet while you drink. We're rain or shine.
That's right. That's right. It don't matter, right?
Nope.
But it is a really neat event. And as Jim said, there's all kinds of veteran service organizations out there. It's not very expensive to go to. Jim, what's the cost for an adult to go to this?
Right now we've got advanced ticket sales, so it's $30 for an adult for an unlimited tasting, and then for veterans and first responders, it's always a $20 ticket, regardless. The day of the event, prices go up a little bit, but it's always been a $20 ticket for veterans and first responders. Otherwise, it's $30, and if you're not a drinker, then it's just normal museum admission prices, which is $9 for adults, and I think it's $5 or $6 for kids.
Yeah,
So it's
really great way to support the museum, and at the same time, you have a competition. Isn't there some sort of competition for the beer?
yeah,
For the brewers?
yes. We put on a People's Choice contest for the beer. You can get ballots or go online and vote for your favorite brews. I hate to say just beer now, because we've got people who are doing tea and mead and ciders and seltzers and some of the others they're a brewed drink, but they're not exactly beer. But you can vote for your favorites, and then based on the category, we hand out awards for the best ale or the best lager, and then as well as the People's Choice for the overall favorite. And it gets pretty competitive with some of the brewers.
Yeah, it really gets to be a lot of fun, because folks are out there and they're just having a good time. It's not like some things that you go to where, you see people that are acting a fool and everything else. This is just a lot of good people coming together to enjoy music. That looks like John Lyons there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's everywhere. But, we bring the mobile museum out there every year that you've invited us, and it's been great. We bring it out, and we've actually had some veterans that started coming to the monthly luncheons, because that's where they found out about our monthly luncheons. So we bring that museum out.
It's an opportunity. The VA will come out with its van, and we'll have VFWs and the Military Order of the World Wars and a lot of these other groups that are not overall known. And there's the picture of the beer flights. I almost forgot about those. We do beer flights, which is we sell tickets to go ride on Southern Cross, the C-47 that's based here at Meacham. And they go up with one of the local brewers, and so they're sampling the beer on the flight while they're flying around Fort Worth. And this year we've got 5 flights. I think they're all virtually sold out. I don't know that we have, but maybe 1 or 2 tickets left on it. So
Wow.
if the weather cooperates, they'll be going up every hour from 11:30 to 3:30.
That's cool. That's very cool. And when do the gates open for this, Jim?
Well,
it's this Saturday, right? This Saturday.
This Saturday, normal time for the museum. The museum opens at 9, and then the vendors and brewers will be coming in from about 7 o'clock in the morning and be set up by 11. And then we will do the first pour at noon, and we will pour beer and serve food until we run out, which last year was actually about 4:30. We ran out of beer and food and everything. So we've made some changes for this year. One of the more important ones that we want to let people know about is that we doubled the number of porta potties this year.
Yeah, drinking and bathrooms go together.
Yeah, and we kind of somehow that got biased last year. We had more brewers and more food, and we didn't, and we had the same number of porta potties. So we learned a lesson hard on that one. So we fixed that. We've got a lot of other things this year too. Well, 2 different bands this year, and more food vendors and more activities for the kids. We've got a big giant bounce house for them, and so it's just an opportunity to come out and have a good time with the family and your friends.
Yeah, and you meet some new friends, because everybody's so friendly, that you sit down on the picnic tables and you don't know who you're sitting there with. And, people just naturally start to have conversations, and you just never know where you might make a new friend. So it's a really neat thing.
We did that intentionally. If any of you have ever been to Munich, to Oktoberfest or any of the big German Oktoberfests, there are not individual tables. It's big, long lines of tables, and you just mix with everybody. And so it's an opportunity, like you said, it's an opportunity to meet some new friends and gather with some others. So that's our beer garden with all of our picnic tables set up underneath the trees.
Yeah, it's really a neat event. So I would encourage folks out there, if you haven't, especially if you haven't been, you got to come out. You got to check it out. It's such a neat experience. It's unlike anything else that you're going to find to do all year. And we're going to say a little prayer that the weather holds out. The weather report I heard this morning was that, unfortunately for us, on Friday, when we have the luncheon, it sounds like we may have the better chance of the worst weather, but then Saturday it sounds like you may get a little out of the woods. So I saw it drop down to 30% chance this morning. So
we'll see. It's going to be it's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it looks like the rain may actually be later in the afternoon, but
right.
Then it may be kind of windy, but sometimes it's part of the experience that adds to the enjoyment. So
yeah, well, I don't think I've ever been when it hasn't been windy. So that's just like you said, that's just a part of the experience. Just imagine the wind coming off of a plane, right? That's what you got.
Well, it's that time of year here in Texas too.
Yeah, it is, and we all know it. We live here.
Yep.
So then,
actually, that's one of the reasons we picked April. It's not for the weather so much, is that we didn't want to go into the summer because it gets too hot.
Oh,
and the first ones we looked at, well, we were going to do it in October, but October is such a busy month here in Texas that, and there's so many other beer festivals, we just didn't want to get trampled with that. So it's we do it now.
Yeah, I think it's great. So we're looking forward to being out there again this year with you as roll call, and just meeting some new friends and letting some folks come through the mobile museum and see. In the mobile museum, you can get in there, and Roy, and I'm not sure if Ricky's coming, but I think he is, but Roy Davis, who handles all of that stuff, will be out there, and he'll be able to tell you stories. And that the stuff in our museum.
I know we get a lot about the mobile museum.
Yeah, the stuff in there is from local DFW area veterans, and with the exception of the piece of the Arizona. Clearly that is not from here, but we have it because one of our veterans, who he recently passed, Harmon Moody, his brother Robert was on the ship, and he went down with the ship. And,
oh, really? Okay.
He's on the wall. So when you go to Pearl Harbor, his name is on the wall, Robert Moody. And so that's how we ended up with that piece of the Arizona, was Mark Donahue did the work to work with them and get that for us. So you'll see that if Roy brings it out this time, it's a pretty neat thing to see. But then, Jim, you and I have worked together on another project to pick out the design for the Tarrant County Vietnam Veteran Memorial.
Right.
So tell everybody about that, because that is really something that we got to get busy getting done.
Yeah, we do. And it started, boy, I was trying to think of it the other day. I think it's been probably 6 years, maybe a little bit longer, when we really started was when DOD announced the first of the 50-year reunion or 50-year anniversaries of the Vietnam War, and it was going to be every year was going to be celebration of another year. Rusty Baker, who was a sergeant major out at the base at the time, had put together a panel with, I think it was like 200 names or close to 200 names of Tarrant County residents or people who had died due to the effects of the war. And it started me to thinking, and I know Ken Cox and I had some conversations about it, that don't those people deserve a permanent memorial here? And so it's been a long process over a long period of time. Mary, you've been involved with it the last several years, where we got enough people interested that we did a contest with local schools to come up with some design ideas, and we came up with one that was kind of the favorite. And so we have been moving this process forward. We over a year ago now, we founded or formed a foundation to do the fundraising for the memorial, and we've been very active with that, doing mostly public appearances. But now we're going to have to start going and talking to foundations and corporations. The plan as it has developed, will have the names inscribed on it of every known veteran from Tarrant County, whoever was born, raised, lived here, died here, but who died because of the effects of the war, including Agent Orange. And this is an unusual aspect of this. Their names will all go on the memorial. It's not going to be a generic memorial. Everybody's name and the year they're passing will be on the memorial. That number of 200 has grown from to about 225. And as you're well aware, people are passing because of Agent Orange now. And that was part of one of the early discussions. Well, what years do we use for people who died? Is it just in the war? Is it just people who died in Vietnam? How about people with wounds received? And then eventually it dawned on us that people are dying today because of the effects of Agent Orange, and that you didn't even have to have gone to Vietnam to have been affected by that. A few years ago, when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, one of the first things my oncologist asked was, had I been to Vietnam? And I said, no, I had. And they said, well, did you use any equipment that had been in Vietnam? And I went, yeah, absolutely. All the planes I flew had been in Vietnam. And so they checked and they said, well, you're safe. None of your airplanes were affected by Agent Orange. But I'd never even thought about it much at that time. But you didn't have to have been a Vietnam vet to be affected by the war and to succumb to a disease that was propagated out of that. So we want all of those people to be included in this memorial to the extent possible.
Yeah. And, Jim, that you mentioned that you put this out to the school children. And so what were the age ranges, if you can tell? And again, I was there. I'm involved in that part of it. But
well, we had middle schoolers up through high school.
Who's you chose and how that process. And I wish I thought about getting a picture of it, because it's a really good looking memorial.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I thought maybe I supplied one to Tyler, maybe not, but you can go to the Tarrant County Vietnam. Nope, that's not it. That's our future. It's our future museum. But you can go to the Tarrant County Vietnam era memorial on Facebook and the webpage, and you can see the designs. But we ended up with about 15 designs that came from middle schoolers up through high schoolers. And Ryan Cezano's design was the one that was the one that most of the people picked and wanted to see that. So over the course of the last several years, we've had to modify that design somewhat, but we've kept the basic concept. We needed to do some things for safety purposes and then materials and some of that, but we have the endorsement of the Parks Department, who originally, the memorial will be in Veterans Memorial Park on Camp Bowie here. And the Parks Department has endorsed what we're doing and has said that this will be the last memorial that goes into that park. The city's Arts Council is endorsing the design and the memorial, which is great because they've said it will go into the city's collection, which will help with the kind of the endowment portion of maintaining the memorial as the years go by. So right now, within the last month or so, we finally got a good figure on what the memorial is going to cost. When we started, part of it was during COVID, and I mean the cost of the memorial were ranging anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 or more, and which doesn't help when you're doing fundraising and they ask how much do you want, and we go, well, somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000.
Right.
So now we know that it will be between 300 and 350,000. We have done a really good job of doing some smaller fundraisers, car shows, gun raffles, all kinds of things like that. And we're at about $40,000 right now, but we're now starting to get geared up to talk to foundations and corporations, and kind of moving the whole process forward. And hopefully this thing will be designed and built and ready in 2026.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folks probably don't even know that there is a a veterans memorial park there on Camp Bowie, and it's in the historic part where the
Right.
bricks. So when you're driving and you hit the bricks,
Yep.
that's then you know you're in the right area. But there is a memorial park there, and it is a pretty neat place to go. If you've not seen it before, you really should just take a ride down there and see those memorials that are there. And this particular one that we're going to have out there, we actually did the ceremonial groundbreaking. It was
Yes.
during COVID that we did that, even, wasn't it? Because there was
Yeah,
still
it
folks
was.
out
It
there.
was, but it's online if anyone can go see it. But we thought it was kind of unusual because as people showed up for the groundbreaking, they got they got a name tag with a picture of one of the people
Right.
who will be on the memorial. And then we did a roll call and welcomed all of those veterans home. And for some people, it was very moving. And so that was the start of the public knowledge of the park
Yeah.
and the memorial.
Yeah. And if people want to help out, clearly they can go to the webpage, they can go to the Facebook page, and it'll have the information there. And as Jim said, there have been some car shows, there have been gun raffles. I know that we have announced those at roll call and put those out in our stuff. But there's also a brick program, so
Yes.
you don't have to be a big donor. You can buy a brick for yourself or somebody else. I know that's something that my husband said he was going to do for me on my retirement. So he's still got to fulfill that because he knew that was very near and dear to my heart. So he said, for your retirement, that's what I want to do for you, is to buy a brick for the memorial. So I'm going to hold him to it. He hadn't done it yet, but he's got to get busy. But they can do that too. And I think you have that information there as well, don't you?
Yeah. You can buy a big brick, small brick. You can buy it for yourself or somebody else. It doesn't have to be related to Vietnam at all. Mm-hmm. Just a way to support that and memorialize these people. If one of the things that's unusual, if you look around at some of the memorials here in Tarrant County, there are very few that have the individuals. They may be a generic memorial, and we think that these 220 some odd people now, when you consider how many people their lives affected, it's a real cross section of the community, and they deserve to have their names displayed for people who come along afterwards. So.
Yeah. And one of the other unique things is that you guys have actually gone through and gotten their story. So like if somebody wants to know more about that name, they can actually find out more about that individual, that each of those individuals, that something about each of those individuals that will be on that memorial.
A lot of the stories were easy because they were on the virtual wall, and so there's a lot of information that you can find there. But our challenge was to find people who had been born here, raised here, died here, that were part of the community. But as you're well aware, in the military, you use home of record, and home of record doesn't necessarily mean it's where you're from; it's where you were when you signed up.
Right.
And so with a lot of these people, their home of record was someplace else, but they were born here. So we've had other people that have scouted out names for us or brought names of their friends to us. And so we are actively going through and adding names as people bring information to us, and we can verify that they in fact are eligible to be on the memorial. So it's an active process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, another really important thing that we do to show our love and our respect for those folks that didn't get shown that love and respect, a lot of them when they came home. So everybody go out there, check it out. And, certainly a lot of good stuff. And Jim, we're getting close to the end. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure to touch on before we run out of time?
Well, we just, bring your kids out, find out a little bit about the vast history here of things that have taken place here in North Texas. We go back to 1911 here in Texas with the history and the development And aviation touches so many lives here, and people learn so much when they come here. We encourage you to come out, bring the kids, touch the airplanes, and just support us in any way possible. So thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I feel honored to have been included on one of your broadcasts, and I look forward to seeing you at one of your meetings or seeing you this Saturday, maybe.
Yeah, I'll be out there. So we've got the roll call lunch coming up on Friday. So it kind of always seems to work that way with Hops and Props. We have the roll call lunch. This month it's on base. And I'm turning those names in today. So if there's anybody out there that still is trying to get in, you won't be able to go online and RSVP. You'll have to reach out to me at info@roll-call.org. That way, then I can get you added. But here in a couple hours, I'm going to turn that list over to the base. And if your name is not on that list, then you're not going to be able to get in and come to the luncheon. So everybody has to be on it. If they're bringing a bus from a living center, if they're coming from a church, whatever, even the driver, everybody has to be on there, every volunteer. So please make sure that you are on that list. And right now we're looking at about 750 to 800 people based on how many of the folks from the base personnel make it out to the lunch. So it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a great lunch. We've got Jim Thomason. It's very timely to talk about Vietnam with Jim. And then we've got Jim Thomason, who is a Vietnam veteran, who will be telling his story. And Kelly Krager, who is a gentleman from Texas Tech. He actually lives in Granbury, but he's a professor at Texas Tech. And he has been working for quite a while on the oral history project. They have a huge Vietnam oral history project at Texas Tech University. And Kelly is heavily involved in that. And he is actually he's going to be the moderator and do the interview with Jim up on stage on Friday. So it's going to be really neat. And of course, great food. Brenda always brings it when it comes to the lunch. So the food will be good. Our bathroom situation will not be as good as yours will be. So I always tell people, come prepared to know that you will have a tight bathroom situation. So plan in advance. So then we have the roll call lunch. And then following that, the next day, of course, is Hops and Props. Got a lot coming up with that. There's always all kinds of stuff going on in our community around veterans, and we'll put out some more stuff via the Roll Call Facebook page, the Hometown Heroes page on events coming up. We'll make sure that we share all that with everybody. We do have Don Graves' 99th birthday coming up.
Yeah,
so yes, keep an eye out for that. We'll put that on our page as well. We're going to do a come and go birthday party for him. I'm sure he's going to have multiple parties. Other people will throw him one, but we are going to have a come and go at your own expense, but we'll have cake out there and we'll decorate it up, but we're going to do it at the Boomer Jacks there on Lake Worth, not far from where you are, Jim.
Right. Yeah.
And they do a great job for us. We go there Friday after the lunch. Every Friday after the lunch, we get a big group that goes out there to enjoy an adult beverage and visit a little more after the lunch. And they're going to give us a part of the patio to do from 12 to 3 on Saturday, May 4th. Will be a come and go birthday party for Don Graves' 99th birthday.
Good.
Can you believe he's 99? He he just never sees like the Energizer Bunny.
Oh, he sure
go,
is.
Go, 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 go.
He sure is.
It's crazy. I want to be like him.
Yeah, loves to sing, right? So
he does, and he'll sing for us too. He'll be happy to sing for us. But come on out for that, and we hope that we see Rick back next week. He'll be seeing a whole lot better. So we're looking forward to hearing the stories of Rick's adventures in seeing better. And I think that's all we got for him today, Jim.
Okay. Well, I
Y'all
appreciate
have a great week. We'll see you next week here on Hometown Heroes.